Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kid Icarus. In the last part, we went through the rest of the second world, the overworld, and now we're back in SkyWorld for the end of the game, really. And the latter half of SkyWorld is a bit more perilous in its platforming in that they love spamming a lot of smaller platforms like this. However, again, because you have Icarus feathers at this point, I believe is what they're actually supposed to be called, or not angel feathers, there's not really much to fear. Again, this game's difficulty curve is weird in that it feels like it's the opposite of what it should be. Because the Underworld is a very hard portion of the game because you have your limited resources, limited health, low attack, as well as just how many enemies they like to spam compared to some of the later stages, because I'm thinking about it more. The later stages have enemies in them, don't get me wrong, but due to the less cramped level structure, it feels like there are just less in your way. Also, one of the few times the game requires you to duck is right here. Weird. Now, again, at the end of the last part, I also did some farming to get myself up to max hearts and got 20,000 extra score. You technically don't need to do that because these next 2 or 3 stages are going to be good for score as well. I just wanted to make sure I got to my goal of 200,000 score, because that's where the last health extension is. Why do I want to make sure I have the max health? I'll go over that towards the very end of the game. Though again, in the case you're like at my level of health, don't worry, it's easy to get another 200 hearts throughout the rest of the game. Just because these latter portions of the game really love spamming half heart enemies and max heart enemies. Particularly stage 3 is very filled with 10 heart enemies. Okay, God. I'm alive. But damn it if that doesn't make my heart stop. Even if I have Icarus feathers. I do have to wonder though, why name the game after the character that died? Why not Kid Daedalus? Does not sound as good? In fact, Icarus, when you think about it, was kind of the main villain of that entire story, barring the god that put them in that tower anyway. He's the one you're supposed to learn the lesson from because he ended up paying the price for it. Greco-Roman mythology has always been one of my favorites, even though I think it's also the one that I think is overused a bit in pop culture. Like, I love it when Norse mythology or some of the other ones get used a bit more, just because there's a lot more interesting stuff to explore there that hasn't really been touched on as much. Alright, now these octopus enemies here are the reason I say you're probably going to be good on score if you don't grind for 20,000. They spawn very frequently, and they each give I think they each give a total of 500 points at least. I mean, you can get some score up pretty quickly with them around. Though I will say one thing about Greco-Roman mythology. It ended up giving me one of my favorite shows, because I really do like Hercules' Legendary Journeys as well as Xena. Though I haven't seen as much Xena as I have Hercules over the years, just because I think that one was on a bit more anyway, and I think, for some reason, I swear the DVDs are a bit more common, and I can't tell if that's just my experience being weird, or if they actually are. Though that one episode where... No, it wasn't an episode. It was one of the season finales, wasn't it? Where they were randomly in, like, Norway working with Thor and stuff. That was, like, in the last 2 seasons, I think. The last season and a half of that show was entertaining, but not as good as the first 4.5 or however many seasons there were of that. I think there was 6 seasons. Because I think the 6th one was a shorter season, I think. By the way, enough about me watching TV shows. When you get towards the latter half of any of these given stages, too, I think the platforming becomes a lot safer. And I don't just mean, like, the latter half of the game. I mean the latter half of the SkyWorld stages. I think they get a lot less dangerous with the platforming. It's a lot more stuff like this, where there's either tighter spaces or less bottomless pit chances over the very beginning of the stage, like one tile-sized platforms. Again, kind of an odd difficulty scale, but I'll take it. I'll also take this hot spring. Ah, hot water. I guess this is a minor nitpick. I think they could have made the health increase a bit faster in one of these. But I'm trying to remember how fast, because the hot springs return in Kid Icarus Uprising for effect. I don't remember if they do it all in Of Myths and Monsters, the Game Boy one. I honestly do not remember or know because I've played very little of Myths and Monsters. I thought that game was forgettable. As instanced by the fact that a lot of people even forget it existed when Icarus Uprising came out. I do wonder if they're ever going to make an Uprising 2, though, because I think that game could do with a sequel on, like, the Switch. Carve out some of the mechanics a bit more, make it more of a, like, right analog stick, left analog stick kind of game. That could be fun. Okay, slow down. Hello. Yeah, this game is definitely an NES game when it comes to that. Now, this is a stage I particularly love to abuse the Icarus feathers in, because the first half of this stage has pretty perilous platforming. So around the time when I get to the harp, I like to jump right down into the bottomless pit and fly up with the feathers by holding A. Because you also get a bit of an extra jump at the end of your Icarus feather, depending on where you are. And I can just use that to skip a lot of the platforming. Though I swear the Icarus feathers have certain sections where they'll last longer, depending on how much is around you or how many platforms you're near. Because that second one definitely lasted for a shorter amount of time than the first one. Now, I believe we're actually coming up on the last normal level shops in the game, so you want to make sure if you need anything, you grab it. Life bottles are going to be useful coming up, but you're also going to want to keep an eye on your hearts count. So, in the case you buy something that expensive, you're going to want to grind up the amount of hearts you'd miss. Thankfully, again, this game doesn't have any time limits in its endings or levels, so you don't have to worry about getting a time over from grinding too much. You know, in a strange way, this stage kind of reminds me of Kirby. I think it's probably just the sky and pillar aesthetic, which kind of reminds me of some of the space levels in like Kirby's Adventure or Nightmare in Dreamland and such. This is probably the best point in the game where you can get some score grinded up, because again, these octopuses love to spawn all over the place. And not only can you get some hearts from them pretty quickly, but the bonus of the score they give is just very useful. Honestly, I would probably recommend, instead of doing what I did at the end of the last part, grinding around here rather than the earlier portions of the stage, or last stage. Though also, I'd forgotten to mention this thus far. This game has one annoying thing in that the stages, from my memory, don't have any interior checkpoints. When you die in a stage, you're sent to the beginning of it, so you want to be careful when it comes to that. Because some of the vertical stages in particular can be a bit lengthy. So be careful and keep an eye on your health. Obviously, I'm saying that quite a bit late because that mostly comes into play early on in the game when death is not more feasible, but certainly more common, I guess is the way to put it, just due to the amount of damage you take and how much HP you have. And right here, I believe, is the last shop in the game that's in a normal stage. The rest of the game's stages are a bit different than the rest of them. Obviously, we have the standard fortress stage coming up. But the stage after stage 3-4 is very different as well. And that's over 200,000 score. That is my final power-up. And Fortress 3-4 is huge. You know how I mentioned that I believe the stages, the map for these things is an 8x8 grid last part? This, I believe, fills out every single one of those blocks on the 8x8 grid. There are a lot of rooms to this place. The boss in particular is in a very specific location, the top right corner, and that is a very specific point to get to because there is only one path to get through there, and it takes you through a lot of rooms. And while I'm very much usually about the point A to B thing in these fortresses, I recommend exploring a bit more in this one because this is probably the boss fight where Centurions are the most useful. I'm also taking a bit of a detour right here to head to the very bottom left room on the map because this is where the hot springs is. Well, one of them. There are 2 hot springs in this place again. However, this is the only one that's directly on the way to the boss fight. The other one is like 2 rooms below and to the left of the boss fight. However, this also goes into the play of why this setup is annoying for this dungeon. The entire top row of rooms can only be accessed through the room just below the top left one. All of them have ladders on the bottom of them, but they're trap ladders that'll make you drop to the second highest row of rooms. And at that point, you have to go back around to the top left room, and that's annoying. As for where things are in here, to get to the map from the start, you need to head right a room, up a room, and then right another room. The first hospital in the area is also very close to that, where you want to head right up as far as you can go, and then left. The second hospital, though, is in a bit of a weird position, because it's towards the bottom right. And to get to there, you want to head, I believe, down almost to the bottom from the start, like the second to last room from the bottom. Right up, and then right as far as you can go. It's weird. The layout of this place is weird. It also has some unique tiles to it. This is a very hard area. Don't be surprised if you get lost in it, and don't feel bad if you do, because this place is pretty mazy. Though I do like how these encourage drawing your own maps in a way that was a bit better than Metroid. Because even though I like Metroid, Metroid 1's maps were laid out in such a strange way that they didn't exactly line up, so drawing those was just kind of annoying. This game, it's in a grid, so it's very hard to screw up the map. Again, though, exploration isn't too worth it, because all you can find is hearts, and at this point, I have as many as I can get. And I'm not going to be grinding for any at this point. The biggest danger, I think, is HP, because compared to some of the other fortresses, the gap between hot springs and boss fight is so large here, you could easily lose most of your health. Oh, God. Eggplant wizards, you are my enemy. At this point, though, we just want to head all the way to the right, because we're on the top row at this point. Do not go down any of the ladders on this floor, because you'll just fall back down to the last one. You have to go all the way back around, because, again, these are trap ladders. Yeah, they lead you to the room below, but there's no way to jump back onto them. I believe this next room is also the final shop in the game, so if you need a chalice, I guess get it, but at the same time, hearts are kind of hard to get at this point. Boss for this stage is the bubble god Pandora. Not actually bubble god, it's, I think, supposed to be the god of chaos or whatever in Icarus Uprising, but either way. This is both the easiest and hardest fight, I think, because Pandora doesn't outright attack. She only moves around in a odd pattern that's not even a pattern, just kind of bounces around randomly, actually. And the only thing that can damage you, aside from her herself, is the balls that are bouncing around. And they bounce around in semi-random ways, too. She fades to black every couple seconds, but I can't tell if that's due to sprite clipping, or if she's supposed to be hiding in the background. Overall, it's a very easy boss fight, especially given she moves the slowest out of all the boss fights as well, I think. Just keep your eyes out, and with your strength, she should go down pretty quickly. Although I keep calling her she. I think that's just Icarus Uprising speaking. I think in the manual, Pandora is described as a male. But, nah. I think Icarus Uprising even lampshades that, now that I think about it. Because that game's humor was on point when it came to both the references and making fun of the old stuff. It's odd, though. This is easily the hardest labyrinth, but I think it has the easiest boss. I wonder if that was their way of balancing out things. Hard area, but easy boss fight. Because I do like it when games decide to do that when they realize you've had enough with the stage itself, so they decide, you know, look, we'll throw you a bone. But at the same time, I also like when the bosses put up a fight. I'm looking at you, Shovel Knight. And that is the final fortress out of the way, and thus we're on to the final level, which is a bit of an odd one. Obviously, we've collected the 3 great treasures that were described in the manual, so we're going to put them on. Pit equipped himself with the 3 treasures. Alright, so this stage is an auto-scroller. Except at the same time, it's not. In the Japanese version, this level played out very differently. You had full control of Pit's movement, including left to right, and that included the scrolling. So essentially, it was you using the Icarus rings from the normal stages, the feathers, for an entire stage. The terrain was completely solid. You can fly through any terrain in this level in the American version. And enemy patterns were changed to be a bit easier. This stage was made a complete joke. I honestly would prefer the Japanese version at this rate, because this place is pretty easy. However, There is at least some challenge to it in that you need to kill, I think it's around 50 enemies to be able to access the final boss. If you don't kill 50 enemies by the time you reach the end of the stage, it loops. However, the amount of enemies you've killed stays with you, so it's just kill more enemies and hope you finally kill around 50 by the time you reach the boss fight again. This final stage, I like the idea of it, but they really went a bit overboard with the changes to the American version here. Like, see that block there? I can just fly through that. In fact, I think I do. I'm not sure if in the Japanese version, if touching things counted as damage like some shoot-em-ups. I think it was just you got stopped by it. Notable though, in the speedrun, they clip through a wall with that left wall clip thing again, and they end up in this stage from the fortress, so they just completely skip the Pandora fight. Either way, we are coming up on the final boss, and it's gonna be Medusa, obviously. But the fight's a bit odd in that it's the simplest out of all the fights in the game, but it's also the most dangerous just due to how it goes about happening. Medusa is always going to be on the right side of the screen in the wall like a shoot-'em-up boss fight. She's going to be shooting out some sonic waves from her eyeball, which your mirror shield will block. You need to hit her directly in the pupil to damage her. I don't know about the exact amount of hits it takes. It depends on your strength, of course. At least I think your strength is influenced here. However, to make things a bit more annoying, she also has her little snake buddy, Thanatos, or Thanatos as it's supposed to be, spawning in every couple of seconds. You can shoot the snake to get rid of it, however, it's also just completely in your way. My favorite strategy for this is just to have some life bottles and mash the B button as fast as I can to get past it. However, if you're low on health and you don't have life bottles, you want to be a bit more tactical about it, where you get placed and such. I think the top left portion of the screen, like the very top left corner, is a completely safe space. So if you want to not take damage, you can sit there and observe the situation for a bit. But overall, you want to be careful here. Now just me showing that, hey, my life bottle is getting used up. It's automatic. It doesn't even have an animation. Also, another American change, we actually get to see Medusa's human form. And that's game. If you also want to not have him leave the screen like this, you can just fly to the right side of the screen at that point, I believe. Thank you, Pitts. Medusa was destroyed and the light of peace returned to Angel Land. But in order to maintain peace, Pitt's struggles continue. And that's Kid Icarus. It's good for NES standards, as I brought up earlier. There's a lot of things I like about the game, but overall it's just kind of clunky, and the weird difficulty curve makes it very hard to recommend to beginners in any way. If you want to check it out, I'd say it's okay and worth a shot, but overall, if you want to get into Kid Icarus, just play Uprising. It's the best game in the series. Now, one thing I mentioned briefly is that there are multiple endings for the game. It's mostly just the end there of Palutena. Essentially, depending on how many things you maxed out between your hearts, your strength, your endurance, and getting the 3 sacred training weapons, you get various endings. If you have none of them maxed out, you get the worst ending. If you get 1, you get a poor one. For 2, you get the mid-tier one. For 3, you get the good ending, which is the best ending in the Japanese version. And for maxing out all 4, you get the best ending that we just saw there. In the Japanese version, things are a little bit different. Not only is the background and the angels not there in the Japanese version, just a solid black screen with Pit and Palutena, but your ending is also based off of your endurance, strength, and deaths. You add your endurance level to your strength level, but then you subtract how many deaths you've had throughout the game. There's also an exclusive worst ending where you get turned into that weird nose enemy from the weird enemy barrages early on. Overall, it's a game. If you want to play it, it's on the NES and some of the various virtual consoles from over the years, but at this point, I know for a fact the Wii shop has been shut down, so you're stuck with Wii U and 3DS. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.